paralyzed Navy SEAL. That's me, grew irritable and difficult with everyone. Until one day, the nurse announced that a dog and a little girl were here to visit me. Little did I know, that child was actually... The blazing sunlight of San Diego poured down onto the runway of North Island Naval Air Station. I stepped off the transport plane, my personal backpack weighing heavily on my shoulders. My camouflage uniform was dusted with a fine layer of sand from my time in the combat zone. Axel, my large German shepherd, walked close beside me. The leash in my hand tightened slightly whenever Axel caught the familiar scent of the ocean. I reached down and patted Axel's head. "We're home, buddy. Can you smell the salt air? No more Middle Eastern dust." Axel cocked his ear, looking up at his comrade. This working dog and I had been through 2 tours in major engagement areas. Today, we were both officially discharged. "I promise, Sarah, this time, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay home and watch the boy grow up. You'll be his protector, understand, Axel?" I pulled out my phone, my finger trembling as I pressed the power button. I was desperate for a text or a call from Sarah. She was in her final weeks of pregnancy. When I left 9 months ago, her belly had just begun to show. I had missed every ultrasound, every time the baby kicked. As soon as the phone found a signal, a barrage of notifications hit me. I froze on the runway. A voicemail from our neighbor. "Jake, if you get this, go straight to Mercy Hospital. Sarah went into labor early. The ambulance is taking her now." My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't stop for any paperwork. I ran straight to the military parking lot, pulling Axel behind me. "Hurry, Axel. Sarah needs us." The old pickup truck sped down the highway. I gripped the steering wheel tight, my eyes fixed straight ahead. Axel sat in the passenger seat. Sensing my tension, he rested his large head on my thigh, letting out a small whine. "I know, Axel. I'm scared too. I've faced bullets, but my hands have never shaken like this." As I turned into the Mercy Hospital entrance, I saw an ambulance pulling up to the emergency room door. Medics were hurriedly pushing a stretcher inside. On it was a woman with disheveled blonde hair. "Sarah." I abandoned the truck in the driveway, jumping out. Axel followed. I ran after the stretcher as it zipped down the long, antiseptic-smelling corridors. "You can't enter this area, officer." A nurse stopped me at the operating room door. "That's my wife. I just got back from the airport. Let me be with her." "You have to wait here. The doctors are doing their best. She's bleeding heavily." The door slammed shut, and the red light above illuminated. I stood there, stunned. I looked down at my uniform, then at Axel. The dog sat on the floor, his brown eyes staring intently. At the closed door, I slumped onto the cold waiting bench. I clasped my hands together, resting my forehead on them. "Remember that time we were pinned down in the valley, Axel? What did I tell you?" Then, Axel tilted his head, gently licking my trembling hand. "I said if we made it back alive, I'd make it up to Sarah. I left her alone for too long. She had to deal with all the morning sickness and all the worry when watching the news about the SEALs. I owe her a lifetime of peace." An hour passed. Then 2. The hospital corridor was silent, save for the hurried steps of nurses far down the hall. I couldn't take my eyes off the door. I kept talking to Axel to keep myself from going mad with worry. "The boy will look like Sarah. He will. He'll have her blue eyes. I'll teach him how to throw the ball for you, Axel. We'll take family trips to Coronado every weekend." Suddenly, there were frantic noises inside the OR. Doctors shouting, alarms blaring. I jumped up, pressing my face against the small window on the door. I saw only blurred figures in blue scrubs rushing about. "What's happening? Why are they running?" I gripped the leash so tightly my palm was white. Axel stood up, his ears alert, letting out small growls in his throat like a warning of some unseen danger. "Easy, Axel. They're saving her. They have to save her." The chaos inside suddenly subsided. A terrifying silence enveloped the space. The red light above the door went out. The door opened slowly. The lead surgeon stepped out, his rubber gloves still stained with dark red smears. He pulled off his mask, revealing a drawn face and eyes filled with regret. I walked toward him, my breath ragged. How is my wife, doctor? Where's my son? The doctor bowed his head, unable to meet my eyes. I'm very sorry, Petty Officer Riley. We did everything we could. Your wife suffered severe hemorrhaging. We couldn't stop the bleeding in time. She passed away on the operating table. My world shattered. I took a step back, leaning against the cold wall. And in my son? The doctor slowly shook his head, his voice choked. The baby was deprived of oxygen for too long due to the mother's complications. When we delivered him, he had no pulse. We tried CPR for 30 minutes, but there was no response. I didn't scream. I stood there, motionless, like a statue carved from stone. All sounds around me faded. I felt myself falling into a bottomless black hole. All the hopes, all the plans for a peaceful home that had sparked just hours ago were now ashes. Would you like to see them one last time? I didn't answer. I stumbled into the operating room. On two metal tables side by side, white sheets covered two bodies. I shakily pulled back, the sheet covering Sarah's face. She looked like she was sleeping, her face serene despite the exhaustion. I knelt by her side, holding her cold, lifeless hand. I'm home, Sarah. Did I come home too? Late. Axel walked up, resting his front paws on Sarah's table, letting out a soft moan. He then turned to the smaller table nearby, where the tiny body of my newborn son lay. Axel gently nudged the sheet covering the baby with his nose, then looked up at me with profound sorrow. I pressed my face against Sarah's hand, and finally, hot tears fell, soaking the sheet. I had seen comrades fall, faced death countless times, but this pain was beyond anything I had ever endured. I should have come home sooner. I shouldn't have taken that mission. I spoke through choke breaths. Axel circled me, rubbing his body against my shoulder the way he always did to comfort me after a tough firefight. The air in the OR was cold and smelled of chemicals. I just stayed there, caught in the greatest loss of my life. The strong SEAL was now just a broken man, clinging to the remnants of a dream that would never come true. Axel lay prostrate at my feet, never leaving my side, loyal and heartbroken alongside his owner on the longest night. The light of the new day brought no hope. The San Diego sky was gray, heavy clouds shrouding the naval base. I stood before the mirror in the quiet house, fastening the last button on my dress blues uniform. My hands, steady when pulling a trigger, now trembled when touching the trident pin on my chest. Axel lay dutifully beside the bed, his eyes following my every move. I looked at my reflection, my face gaunt, my eyes red from staying awake all night. I picked up my white cover and set it on the table. We have to go, Axel. They're waiting. Axel stood up, his tail gave a weak wag, lacking its usual enthusiasm. I bent down and stroked his back. You have to stay disciplined today. This is a crucial day for Sarah and the boy. I drove onto the base. Rain started to fall, drumming against the windshield. I parked in front of the Navy chapel. Guards stood at attention, saluting as my truck passed. I let Axel out. The chapel had long wooden pews and stained glass windows. Inside, the silence was so profound I could hear my own footsteps. On the raised platform, two white caskets rested side by side. I walked to the front, standing between the two caskets. Sarah lay there, wearing the light blue silk dress she wore to my last deployment farewell party. Her face was lightly made up, looking peaceful, like a deep sleep. Beside hers was the smaller casket. My son was dressed in a tiny SEAL uniform, the little cover resting beside his hands that had never held anything. I reached out and touched the edge of my son's casket. I'm sorry I didn't get to meet you, son. I should have been the first one to hold you. Axel walked around me. The dog didn't lie down as usual. He kept sniffing the air around the small casket. His ears were perked, his black nose twitching constantly. Lie down, Axel. Discipline. Axel didn't obey. He pressed against the side of the casket, letting out low whines in his throat. I gently tugged the leash, not wanting the dog's restlessness to disrupt the solemnity. The chapel door opened. Miller, my closest teammate, walked in with the rest of the SEAL team. They wore their dress uniforms, chests adorned with medals. Miller walked up to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. We're here for you, Jake. The whole team is. I nodded, my throat parched. Thanks, Miller. Sarah always said you were the loudest one on the team, but she liked you a lot. Miller looked at the 2 caskets, his eyes watering. She was an amazing woman. And the boy, he looks like you, Jake. Look at that. Forehead, definitely a little warrior. I looked down at my son. I was going to name him Leo. I wanted him to grow up strong like a lion. But now, I don't even know what color his eyes are. Don't torture yourself, man. You were doing your duty for your country. Sarah understood that. She did, but I don't. I'd trade every one of these medals for 1 minute of hearing him cry. Axel started circling again. The dog refused to stay in his designated spot. He kept moving towards the child, his brown eyes glued to the tiny, still body. What's wrong with Axel? Miller asked, watching the dog. I don't know. Maybe he feels the loss too. He's sensitive. The other servicemen filed past. They stood at attention, saluting their fallen comrade's wife and child. The sound of their boots on the stone floor was a dry, hollow thud. No one spoke, only nods and tight handshakes. The chaplain walked up to the podium. He opened the Bible, preparing to begin the service. We are gathered here to commend Sarah Riley and her son into God's eternal keeping. I stood at attention, my chin slightly raised in proper military posture. But inside, I felt like I was collapsing. The chaplain's prayers washed over me. I only stared at Sarah, then at Leo. The rain outside intensified, creating a steady rhythm on the chapel roof. Axel suddenly pulled away from my feet. The dog moved closer to the small casket. He sniffed the baby's tiny feet. I signaled for Axel to return. Axel returned to position. Lie down. This time, Axel completely ignored the command. The dog nudged the side of the casket with his nose. He let out a low growl, not of aggression, but of urgency. Just let him be, Jake, Miller whispered. Working dogs have strange instincts. Maybe he's just saying goodbye in his own way. I sighed, loosening the leash. I looked at Axel, then at my son. In that moment, I wished it was all a nightmare. I wished I were on a helicopter preparing to jump into the sea, where it was dangerous, but at least I knew how to fight. Here, faced with death, I was utterly helpless. The chaplain continued his somber reading. Life is a gift, and though brief, Sarah and her child have left an indelible mark on our hearts. My chest ached. I remembered the letters Sarah sent me. She wrote about buying the new crib, about choosing the paint color for the nursery. Everything was ready, except they were no longer here to use it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next, Miller. I spoke quietly, my eyes still fixed ahead. That house is too big now. I can't look at that empty crib. You can stay on base with us for a few days. Don't go back there alone. I have to. I still have Axel to take care of. He's the only thing connecting me to the days Sarah was alive. She loved him so much. Axel suddenly stood still. He stopped pacing. The dog rested his head on the edge of the baby's casket, his eyes narrowed, watching with extreme focus. His ears rotated slightly, aimed towards Leo's little chest. The silence in the chapel became heavy. Dozens of seals stood there, like stone statues. The smell of fresh flowers mingled with the scent of burning candles, creating a somber atmosphere. I saw a drop of water fall onto my son's cheek. I reached out to wipe it away, realizing it was rain from my sleeve. The child's skin was pale and cold. I gently touched his small lips. Sleep well, my warrior. Axel suddenly barked, a single sharp sound. It echoed in the confined space of a chapel, startling many. The chaplain paused, looking at the dog. Jake, control your dog, a senior officer standing behind me admonished. I gripped the leash tight, pulling hard on Axel. Axel, quiet. Down now. The dog resisted my pull. He clawed at the stone floor, his eyes still locked on the child. He began to whine more intensely, his tail wagging. Strangely, what is wrong with him? Miller stepped closer to help me hold Axel. I don't know. He's never lost control like this. Axel, obey. Quiet. But Axel seemed no longer the strictly trained working dog. He was reacting to another, more powerful instinct, more urgent than any military command. He looked at me, then at the baby, as if trying to communicate something that human language couldn't grasp. The rain continued outside. The service went on amid the restlessness of the K-9 and the profound sorrow of the Navy SEAL. No one knew that behind the mournful silence, something was stirring under the watchful eyes of a loyal four-legged friend. The chaplain closed his Bible. He looked at me with sympathy and stepped back, yielding to the funeral home staff, preparing for the final rites. It is time for us to send them to their eternal rest. I stood rooted to the spot. My hands were clenched until they were white. I looked at the two caskets one last time. A thought flashed through my mind. When that lid closes, I will truly be alone. Miller walked up, placed a hand on my shoulder, ready to usher me away. Just then, Axel violently pulled the leash from my hand. The sudden, immense jerk threw me off balance, and the leash slipped away. Axel didn't run for the door. The dog leaped onto the platform, his front paws hitting the edge of Leo's small casket. Axel began to bark. The sounds were loud and urgent. The dog turned his head to look at me, then back at the baby, his tail hitting the wooden side of the casket forcefully. "Axel, get down. What are you doing?" I lunged forward to pull him off. Two other SEALs stepped up to assist. The solemnity of the service was completely shattered. Attendees murmured, some women covered their mouths in distress. "Stop! Don't touch him!" I yelled, abruptly stopping. I froze when I saw Axel was not aggressive. He wasn't snarling or growling. He was barking with desperation, the way he did when he located a buried comrade in a war-zone rubble pile. The startled chaplain said, "Petty Officer Riley, you must remove the dog. This is a sacred place." I ignored the chaplain, fixing my gaze on Axel's actions. The dog suddenly lowered himself. He skillfully climbed right into the small casket, where there wasn't much space. Axel lay down, using his entire large, warm, furry body to cover Leo's chest and abdomen. "Look, Miller, he's not damaging anything." Miller stood aghast. "What is he doing, Jake? The boy is gone." "I don't know, but Axel has never been wrong. When he detects life, you see something, don't you, Axel? Tell me." Axel lay perfectly still. He closed his eyes, his breathing heavy and quick. He pressed his warm fur against the pale skin of a child. Occasionally, he nudged the baby's neck gently with his nose, then licked his cold cheeks. The entire chapel was enveloped in an eerie silence. The murmurs stopped. They stood there, holding their breath, watching the four-legged creature attempting something impossible. The scent of dog fur mixed with the scent of roses created a poignant atmosphere. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I stood right next to the casket, sweat running down my forehead despite the cold rain. Outside, the doctor said the boy was gone for 18 hours, Jake. Don't get your hopes up only to be crushed again. Miller whispered, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm out of habit. I know what the doctor said, but I also know Axel. He saved me in the Karangal Valley when everyone thought I was dead. He never gives up. I leaned down, speaking to my son lying under Axel's warm body. "Leo, if you can hear me, fight, son. Axel is helping you. Don't leave your dad alone." Suddenly, Axel barked one final, loud time and then leaped out of the casket. He stood on the floor, his tail wagging furiously, his eyes never leaving the baby. A tiny finger on Leo's hand moved slightly. I rubbed my eyes. I thought I was hallucinating from exhaustion. But then, the baby's chest rose and fell strongly. A shiver ran through the tiny body. "Look!" The baby moved. A woman in the front row screamed. A faint cry rang out. It was a soft whimper at first, but then it grew stronger, turning into a powerful, vital shriek. The cry shattered the morning atmosphere, echoing throughout the corners of the Navy chapel. I rushed forward. I scooped my son out of the casket. The baby was now pinker, the warmth from Axel still lingering on his little SEAL outfit. Leo cried convulsively, his tiny arms flailing in the air. "My son is alive. He's alive." I held him tight, tears streaming down my face, soaking my formal uniform. I dropped to my knees, one arm holding my son, the other pulling Axel close. "Thank you, Axel. Thank you for bringing him back." Axel licked my forehead, then gently licked Leo's tiny hand. The dog let out soft, happy whines. The entire congregation erupted. The usually stoic seals now hugged each other, many openly weeping. Miller rushed over, touching the baby's foot, still unable to believe his eyes. "I can't believe it. It's a miracle. A real miracle, Jake." The chaplain made the sign of the cross, muttering words of gratitude. He walked over to me, placing his hand on the child's head. "God sent you a four-legged angel. This is the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed in my ministry." Medics who had been on standby rushed in with emergency equipment. They checked Leo's pulse and breathing with utter astonishment. Pulse is stable. Body temperature is rising. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately for intensive monitoring." I stood up, refusing to let go of my son. "I'm going with him. Axel is coming too." "But Sergeant, hospital rules." "To hell with the rules, doctor. If it weren't for this dog, my son would be 6 feet under right now. Where he goes, Axel goes." The ambulance sirens wailed as the convoy left the base, but this time there was no desperation. I sat in the back, one arm steadying Leo's transport cradle, the other resting on Axel's head, who lay at my feet. "You see that, Axel? We're going home. The three of us." I looked out the window. The rain had stopped, and a few weak rays of sun were beginning to pierce the gray clouds. I glanced at the hearse carrying Sarah's coffin, which was slowing down to turn towards the cemetery. "Sarah, can you see? Our son is alive. I'm going to raise him right. I promise." Miller, sitting in the passenger seat, turned back to look at me. "What are you going to name him? Still Leo?" I looked at my son, who was finally drifting off to sleep after his long cry, then at the German shepherd guarding us. "His name is Leo, but his middle name will be Axel. Leo Axel Riley. So he never forgets who saved his life today." Axel's ears twitched when he heard his name. The dog rested his chin on my leg, his gentle brown eyes watching the child. At the hospital, doctors could only explain that the baby had entered a deep catatonic state, and the sustained warmth and physical stimulation from Axel had revived his heart and lungs. But for me and my fellow SEALs, it wasn't just medicine. It was brotherhood, the invisible bond between a soldier and his K9. I walked out into the hospital corridor, looking down at the courtyard where Axel was being fed and petted by my teammates. "You've pulled off the biggest rescue of your career, buddy." I returned to the nursery where Leo lay in the incubator. The baby stirred faintly. I knew the road ahead would be difficult without Sarah, but I was no longer afraid. I had a warrior son, and I had the most loyal four-legged comrade in the world. "Welcome to the world, Leo Axel." A bark echoed up from the courtyard like an affirmative reply. The miracle had happened, not from something distant, but from the warm heart of a K9 who refused to give up on his comrade, even one who was brand new to the world.